Okay, good evening. We're going to do a sound test here. Our weekly sound test is always a moment of excitement for us. How are we doing, Andy? Awesome. Okay, so if you've joined us online and would like a copy of the notes that people have here in the room, please feel free to, you can either message Andy and he can email them to you, or you can get them on the website as well. And what's that? Okay, yeah. So Andy sent the links out there. So if you're watching online, want to see a copy of the notes, you can do that. Everyone here in the room have a copy of the notes? Do we need to do any shuffling around here? We need one copy here. Okay. Got that. Okay, the other thing is this is just a roster. And so if this is your first time here or you haven't put your name on here, the purpose of this is if I need to cancel class or something of that nature, this is how I communicate with everybody. So just put your name and number on there and go ahead and just pass that around. Again, if your name's already on there, you don't need to worry about it. So, great, you're good. We can always get more if we need to. We got some extra ones there. Catherine, did you steal one? Oh, all right. Okay, so let's get started. And again, at your tables, if you don't know everyone's name, please share names. And then the discussion question is, what is a skill that you have that you could teach to someone else? What is a skill you have that you could teach to someone else? Mine, I kind of did a cop-out on this answer, public speaking. I would do public speaking. So, yeah, I actually have a degree in that, if you can believe it or not. All right, so go ahead and share your name and a skill you have that you can share with someone else. And now, that doesn't mean you're going to, it just means you could. All right, and go. Jeff Martin? That's awesome. Yeah. Tell him it's just Red Bull. It's just Red Bull. That's funny, though. Oh, hey, Andy. Hey, Jeff, you're watching online. Thanks for watching. I'm just drinking Red Bull. That's all that it is. It's nothing more than that, Jeff. Thank you for asking. Okay. Anyone have extra handouts at your tables? Raise your hand if you have an extra one. If not, I do have one right here. It is not on the fancy green paper. Okay. Okay. A quick review from last week is, and I'll start with the fill in the blanks right away here. So the Bible stories are connected by literary devices. And last week I pointed out how, great American novels are 180 to 450 pages. And Bible stories are like 15 to 60 verses or sentences. And, these short Bible stories have had a greater impact on the world than these 200 to 400 page novels. And the question is, how does the Bible do that? How do you get so much meaning in such little space? And I pointed out that Idaho is 83,000 square miles in area, and there are 2 million people. New York City is 300 square miles and has over 8 million people. Well, how do they fit all those people in such a tiny space? They build up or down. They layer their buildings to get all those people in there. And that's what the Bible does. The Bible layers its meaning in order, and again, I'm very clear about this. It doesn't mean that one layer is more true than another layer. This isn't a Bible code. This isn't secret meanings. It's just that there are literary devices that add layers of meaning to the tiny little bit of space that the scripture has. And one of the literary devices that they use is, where have I heard this before? So there are words or themes or images that are used in 2 or more stories. And when the Bible does that, it is telling you, connect these 2 stories to see another layer. And what we did last week is we compared the story of the fall to the Cain and Abel story. And what we saw was, in both of those stories, you have the themes of a sin is committed, God asks a question, there's some kind of hiding that happens, there's some farming implications that happen, and there is some kind of traveling implications that happen. And those 2 stories are connected. And when you look at how those themes, how they play out in those 2 stories, what you clearly see is that things are getting worse. From the fall to the Cain and Abel story, things are quickly getting worse. And that's intentional by the scripture. So another pairing of stories that are connected, and we looked at this last week, was the flood story and the creation story are connected. Genesis 1 and Genesis 8, where when you look at in Genesis 8 and how the flood waters recede, if you compare that to the creation story in Genesis 1, you have basically the same thing happening. First, light appears, and the rain stops, so there's sky, and then ground appears. And then all of a sudden you have birds in the air, and then you have creatures on the ground, and humanity comes, and there's even seasons that get reestablished. Well, all that stuff happens in Genesis 1. So Genesis 1 and Genesis 8 are meant to be looked at together. And when you look at it that way, it gives you a different take on the flood story. The flood story, while yes, is a story of judgment, that is definitely one layer of meaning, there's another layer of meaning, which is, if Genesis 1 is about creation, Genesis 8, or the flood story, is about recreation. The stories are meant to be looked at together. So the flood story and the creation story are connected, and the flood story is a recreation story to make earth more habitable for sinful humanity. Because before the flood, man was sinful and the earth was corrupted. And God says, God doesn't just say, I'm going to destroy humanity. God says, I'm going to destroy the earth because humanity's wickedness has corrupted the earth. So before the flood, humanity was sinful and the earth was corrupted. After the flood, man is still sinful. But now the earth is no longer corrupted. And so what changed? Well, what changed was the earth. Because before the flood, man sinful and corrupted the earth. After the flood, humanity has not changed. The earth has. And so God recreated the world so that sinful humanity could live in it and not corrupt it like it before the flood. Which is why God can then say, I'm never ever going to destroy the world like this again. Okay? And by looking, but the only way you can see that is if you compare those two stories and say, hey, look, this is like the same story. What's the connection between these two stories? And then you go back and you look at the flood story again, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right, because the earth has changed. So then last week, what I did, and this is not so much in your notes, but you can just write down John chapter 1. This whole idea of having common themes to connect stories continues into the New Testament. This isn't just an Old Testament phenomenon. John 1 begins with, in the beginning, which is exactly how what begins? Genesis 1. Genesis 1 and John 1 literally begin with the same three words. And it's almost as if John is telling us, I want you to connect this with Genesis 1. And then, as I pointed out, in John 1, there are 7 days. That's not coincidence. And on day 1, or the things that are created in the first 4 days in Genesis 1, you can find in the first 4 days in John 4. You can find light, sky, earth, and the putting of the stars in place. And if you're wondering, where do you find that fourth one? In Genesis 1, the word for putting the stars in place is called Natan. And Nathan, the only time that Nathan is called Nathan is in the Gospel of John. The other 3 Gospels call him Thaddeus. John intentionally calls him Nathan, which is an amazing coincidence since his name appears in Genesis 1, Nathan. So, John 1 is saying, I want you to connect this to these other stories. So, if Genesis 1 is creation, and Genesis 8 is recreation of the earth, John 1 is about Jesus coming to recreate us, humanity. As it says in Corinthians, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, they are a new creation. All of that is intentional. Okay? So that's just all review. I haven't given you anything new. If you were here last week, you're like, Chuck, get on with it. All right, we'll get on with it. Let's look at Genesis 9. What I'd like you to do at your tables is read Genesis 9, verses 11 to 17. And here's what we're going to do tonight just to kind of set this up. So we're going to finish looking at the flood story. There's one more detail of the flood story that I have not addressed yet. It's very important, actually. And then we're going to look at the Tower of Babel. And that will basically take us to the end of the stories when it comes to the first 11 chapters of Genesis. And we'll go to the Tower of Babel, and then I'm going to work our way all the way back to Genesis 1 so that you can see sort of what the first 11 chapters of the book of Genesis is doing. And then next week, we'll move on to Abraham. Okay? All right. I can tell everyone's very excited. So go read Genesis 9, verses 11 to 17. And then the one question I just want you to try to answer as a table is, what's God doing in this passage? So this is after the flood. Noah's back on the land, and now read. Go ahead. Oops. Is that me? Thank you. Yes. Okay. So for those of you online, I got a very in-depth question of how did the people on the boat, deal with all the animal smells, and this was their words, poop, not my word, and that kind of stuff. And then how'd they feed all the animals? Well, if you've ever watched the show Big Bang Theory, Sheldon's mother explains that they fed the animals with the bodies of all the sinners that died in the flood. So that's as good as an answer as any as I could come up with. So be careful what kind of questions you ask. So what is God doing in this passage? He's making a covenant. And what's the goal here? Why make the covenant? What's God trying to do? Make a promise not to destroy the earth again. Now, if we were talking about war, we would call this the peace talks, right? God is trying to make peace. Now, and he says, I will never do this again. Why does God need to engage in peace talks? What just happened? The flood. Everyone is killed. So you had this act of judgment by God, and now God is trying to convince humanity that I'm not going to do this again. You see, God had just destroyed everything. No, the distinction is good. So the distinction made in the room was that God said he wouldn't destroy the earth, he would destroy it by flood. Yes, but it's still a covenant, and this is a covenant of peace. Because God has just destroyed the earth. And, again, think about this. I almost always take things back to parenting. Okay? Your kids did something horrible. And you laid down the law. Okay? The hammer came down. Okay? At some point, you need to somehow communicate to your kids that you still love them. Hey, I love you, as they're in the corner sobbing because, they're traumatized. And, you just added stuff that they're going to have to talk to their counselor about when they're 25. Okay. And so this is what God just did. How does humanity know that they can trust God? And this, what God is doing here, is one of the fundamental goals that God has always had with us. I am for you, not against you. Well, how can we believe that, God, when you just destroyed the earth? Or, God, how can I believe that when I just lost my job? Or my mom and dad, or brother or sister, or son or daughter just died? Or I've been diagnosed with cancer? How can you tell me that you are for me, not against me, when so many of our experiences tell us otherwise, where we feel like God is punishing us, that God's got something, we must have done something wrong. And God's like, no, I am for you, not against you. And so after the flood, God offers the rainbow as a sign that he is for us. Now let's take a look at verse 13. Everyone look at verse 13 in your Bibles. If you have a different translation, I am very interested in what your other translation says. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Okay, so the question is, and is this on your sheet? How's a rainbow a sign of peace? Is that on your... Okay, how's a rainbow a sign of peace? Sometimes we think God just kind of randomly does stuff, like he makes things up on the go. God doesn't make stuff up on the go. There's a reason why this is a sign of peace. Why? Now, does anyone have a different translation other than rainbow? I have put my bow in the clouds. That is actually a more literal translation. It's not, I have put my rainbow in the clouds. It is, I have put my bow in the clouds. Now, what is a bow? It is a weapon. So, right now, we're kind of looking at it on its side. Does that look a little bit more like a bow? Do you see that? Now, if it was an actual bow, that's what it would look like. But look at the rainbow. Look at the bend in the bow tells you which way the arrow is pointing. Oops. The bend in the bow tells you which way the arrow is pointing. Which way is the arrow pointing? Away from the earth. Don't freak out, I have a knife. It's better than having a gun, okay? So, if I feel like if something happens in the middle of the night and I think someone's in my house, I get my knife out, I'm ready to fight. But then I realize it's just Pastor Brett trying to freak me out. So what do I do with this knife to let him know that I don't have anything against him? The first thing I do before I put it down is I turn it away from you. And I take the threat away. I'm going to fight. I am not going to fight. I'm putting my weapon down. It's fine. It's okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I actually have a gun in my back. Yeah, I'm going to get you. But do you see that? This is really important. So God has just destroyed the earth. Okay, that's this action. And he's saying, look, I'm not going to, I have nothing against you. It's okay. That's why this is a sign of peace. God is like, hey, look, I'm putting my weapon down. You don't have to be afraid of me. And this continues because God continues to offer peace. And God is always like, what do I need to do? And again, it's not like God's dumbfounded by this. This was his plan from the beginning. But for our purposes, God is like, what do I have to do to convince these people that I am for them, not against them? What do I need to give them? What do I need to give them? And God decides, I'm going to give them my son. Look, I am for you, not against you. Take my son. I don't know, what else is he supposed to do to convince us? He gave us his son. Sacrificed his son. He's for us, not against us. And here's just one piece of that. Questions? This is kind of a big deal. And it changes the story of the flood a little bit, yes? Yeah, there's judgment in the flood, absolutely. But God remodeled this earth so sinful humanity can still be here. Yeah, Marvin. The earth. Correct. The earth. It's a covenant between me and the earth. Absolutely. It was about a remodel. Okay? All right. Kind of cool? Kind of fun? Just pretend like it is. All right. Let's go to the Tower of Babel. And what I would like you to do is read. So Tower of Babel, we're jumping now to chapter 11. And I want you to read the first 9 verses. And I would like you to I think on your sheet, do I say just, before we not read that, sorry. There's a discussion question on the bottom of the sheet. And the discussion question is, if you had all of God's power at your disposal, and you saw the people building this Tower of Babel, how would you stop it from being built? So you look down on you're God, and I always like to do this. You're not God, because that makes people uncomfortable. You are God's executive committee. The people at your table represent God's executive committee. And God comes to you as his executive committee, and he says, hey, I want your input on something. The people down there are building this tower. I don't like the fact they're building this tower, and I want to stop them from building this tower. With all of my powers at your disposal, give me some ideas. So I would like all of you to come up with 2 ideas, each table, come up with 2 ideas of how you could stop the people from building the tower. And if you know this story, do not go to the answer in the story. That's boring. Yes. You are God's executive committee. So you are taking this from the viewpoint of God. Yeah. Yep. All right. Okay. People are building his tower. God's not happy with it. He comes to you as his executive committee and says, all my powers are at your disposal. How can I stop them from building this tower? And go. Okay, let's just have some fun and let's see what ideas people came up with for stopping this tower from being built. Okay, I'll start with you. Just give me your 2 here. I'll repeat them so people online can hear. Distract them by giving them internet and smartphones. Okay, that's creative. Give me another one.
The other one I liked was for every layer they try to go up, the tower sinks the exact.
For every layer the tower goes up, it sinks 2 levels. That's creative. I like that. Yes, right here. 2. Turn all the rocks into gravel. I like it. And what's the other one? Eliminate their technology. It's just unavailable. Good. Earthquake. Good. And a sinkhole. I like it. Good. Here. Make them all left-handed. I think I have to apologize to all the left-handed people in the room. I feel like we're gonna have a fight now. Where's that knife? Okay. Yes. And another one? Oh, make him blind. That works. Yes. 2 from his table. An earthquake and a volcanic eruption. Very good. A little fire and brimstone. I like it. Okay. What do we got here? Take away the supplies. Good. Build a distraction. Sort of the smartphone idea. Good. That table right there. Earthquake and sinkhole. Okay. You got anything different? Oh, a drought or famine. That works. That works. Okay. So what I would like you to do now, and again, what I'm pointing out here is that somebody on some executive committee suggested to God, hey, just confuse their languages. Well, really? Confuse their... I liked many of the ideas in this room. Just earthquake, sinkhole, take away the turn everything into gravel. There's lots of ways. You see, sometimes when we look at these stories, we think, well, God was just trying to stop him from building the tower. Well, I think if God was trying to stop him from building a tower, there's a lot of other ways he could have done it that would have been, I don't know, easier, more effective. I don't know. What is it about confusing their languages to do that? And I would then advocate the idea that God's number one purpose was not to stop them from building the tower, but rather something else. Now, building the tower needed to be stopped. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But maybe what God was really trying to do was something else. Okay? So, read the story and then just answer the first 2 questions on the back page. Don't try to answer the second 2 questions. Just answer the first 2 questions. But read the story at your tables, answer the first 2 questions, and then we will continue and go ahead and go. You know, and I'm totally fine with that. You know, on Sunday, if you aren't able to make it and you're on your recliner, you know, enjoying your cup of coffee laid up. My only issue with that is the elders will never let me preach like that. If I got a recliner out there and was in my PJs preaching, I'd hear about it. And I'd be like, that's not fair. Lots of people are doing it. Why can't I do it? Yeah. Hey, I'll do that. Yeah. People are encouraging me to do that. I will do that, which will be my last Sunday. So, anyway. Okay. So, let's go into the text here a little bit. Why are they building the tower? To make a name for themselves and to not be scattered. And they are building the tower with what? Bricks, not, and what else? Tar, not. Okay, now, what's the difference between bricks and stone? Say that again, Joe. Bricks are man-made, and what about stone? Stone you find in nature. You can find a stone quarry. There are no brick quarries. Bricks are made. Okay? So good. The same is true with the difference between tar and mortar. Okay? Now, everyone look at verse 2. Where are they building this thing? They found a plain. What's wrong with that? What's the goal? The goal is to reach the heavens. Why wouldn't you find a mountain to start from? Or a hill at least. Why are you starting from a plain? Well, no, but again, yes, because it was flat, that kind of stuff. But again, you could find a hill, flatten the top of the hill, and that'd be a lot easier than starting from the plain. What's that? What can you see from further away? Yeah, well, if it's on a hill. If it's on a hill, you can see it from... Anyway, but you'll notice that they are not using anything from nature. We're going to start from a plain. We're using bricks and tar. We are doing it ourselves. Yes, thank you. They are using man-made materials. They are not getting any help from nature. Now, the next two questions, 3 and 4. Okay, you'll note, building of the tower, what does that demonstrate? Humanity's what? Now, in verse 3, it says, they said to each other, come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly. And they used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Okay, then verse 4, they say, come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves, otherwise we'll be scattered over the face of the whole earth. Now, verse 4 seems like the goal, and verse 3 seems like the means to the goal. The goal is to build a tower that reaches the heavens. That's the goal. The means is to make bricks. Everyone see that? Well, don't you start with, when you're talking to each other, don't you start with the goal first? Hey, we want to build a house. And then you start saying, well, where do we want to build it and how big and blah, 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 blah. But it would sort of be like saying, hey, let's go get some wood and stuff, and then let's go build a house. Well, that's backwards. You determine the goal first, and then you decide how to achieve the goal. And the point of that is that this isn't one goal. These are two separate plans. The first thing they say is, let's make some bricks. Let's make bricks, and let's bake them thoroughly. Then after they learn how to make bricks and bake them thoroughly, they say, hey, let's take these bricks and let's build a tower. And building the tower demonstrates humanity's technology. So I'll just use this again. Someone figures out a knife. Well, once we figure out the fundamentals of a knife, now we say, well, what kind of things can we do with a knife? And there are some knives that are better for certain kinds of cutting and certain kinds of stabbing. And we have all sorts. When I was looking for this knife, I went through like a dozen different knives, and I'm like, well, which will illustrate my point the best? We've discovered lots and lots of ways of how to make knives depending on what we want to do. So once we learn something, we take one step in technology, and then we get there and we're like, oh, now what can we do? And then we do that. And we get there and then we're like, oh, now what can we do? And then we do that. And then we get there and we say, well, now what can we do? And then we do that. And we just build upon our technology. And many times we say, can we do this? Hey, can we let's make bricks and what about this tower? We can build a tower. And then what else can we do? We never ever ask, should we do that? That is never a part of the conversation. It's always, can we do that? And then there are things that we can do that we cannot undo. But it's humanity's nature to continue moving forward with technology. And many times we do it because we can. That's often the goal. Can we do this? And no one ever asks, should we? And then we get into trouble. And once you do something, you can't undo it. That's a problem. And it goes all the way back to the tower. So, common language now is humanity's medium for collaboration. And what I mean by that is, let me just put it to you this way. Let me give you other mediums. What would happen if the internet was permanently gone? Or what would happen if all forms of our communication, internet, phones, Morse code, whatever, smoke signal, whatever, all of our different ways of communicating, what if, all those different mediums disappeared? What happens to us? We're toast. As a society, we're toast. Our language allows, in this case, our language allows for collaboration. Technology is a communal enterprise. You get two brilliant minds together and they can come up with all sorts of stuff. You get a group of people together. Again, what was movie Oppenheimer? You brought the most brilliant scientific minds together to figure out how to build a nuclear bomb. Well, that's collaboration. And that's how it always goes. And so what God is doing here is he is stopping humanity from being able to collaborate as easy as they could before. He doesn't completely eliminate it, but he makes it a lot harder. And in doing that, he's going straight after our ability to make technological advances. Now, he doesn't end it, because obviously we continue to make lots of technological advances. But in the Tower of Babel, God is taking a shot at that because, let's see, what does God say? If as one people, this is verse 6, if as one people speaking the same language, they've begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. That, God says, is a problem. Okay? Now, In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to work ourselves backwards from the Tower of Babel. So Tower of Babel is God taking a shot, sort of throwing a monkey wrench into our ability to advance technologically. He doesn't end it, but he does make it harder. Okay? Now we're going to work our way back. Everyone go to Genesis chapter 6. Verses 1 to 7. Go ahead and write that. Is that on your papers? And is there a question that's something like, what happens in the prelude to the flood? Okay, so read those 7 verses and answer that question at your tables and go. Okay, yes. Yes. You're having a discussion on the sons of God. I am going to greatly disappoint you. I'm really not going to get into that. Hey, I got to disappoint you sometime. I can't always fulfill your expectation. No. What is happening in the prelude to the flood? God's disappointed, but what's happening as well? You have so you have what's verse 1? Human beings are increasing in number, and they're also increasing in ability, right? The Nephilim are heroes of old, men of renown. But then right after that, what does it say about humanity? They are wicked. So they're increasing in number, they're becoming more amazing, and they are becoming more wicked. And so God in the flood needs to wipe all of that out. Now, God does say in verse 3 that he's going to limit humans to 120 years. And I just want to point out that while that doesn't happen immediately, I just want to point something out. If you look in chapter 5 of Genesis, go to verse 5. Adam lived 930 years. Chapter 5, verse 8. Seth lives 912 years. Verse 11, 905 years. Verse 14, 910 years. Verse 17, 895 years. Verse 20, 962 years. Verse 27, 969 years. Okay? Now, that's pre-flood. Now, if you go post-flood to chapter 11, this is actually even post Tower of Babel. Chapter 11, verse 11, Shem lived 500 years. Verse 13, 403 years. Verse 15, 403 years. Verse 17, 430 years. Verse 19, 209 years. Verse 21, 207 years. Verse 23, 200 years. And verse 25, 119 years. So what God is doing in the flood is he's not just, okay, they increased in number, and they're also increasing in whatever their abilities are with whatever these sons of God and daughters of men, Nephilim things are. But that all becomes a problem. And so in the flood, God doesn't just wipe out the number, he also wipes out how long they're going to live on the earth. And you see the dramatic decrease happen pre-flood and post-flood. Okay? So that's, again, does God eliminate our ability to reproduce? Does he eliminate our years? No. He simply reduces them, similar to what he does with technology. Okay? Now, let's go back to the garden, chapter 3. Some of this I talked about a couple weeks ago, so some of this will be review for some of you. But again, what are the punishments for Adam and Eve's sin? Well, Eve, in verse 16, it says, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Okay? So that would be making reproduction harder to do. And then the punishment for Adam is the ground is, verse 17, cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and dust you will return. That is a curse on man's ability to produce. And you could argue that it's similar to what he does at the Tower of Babel. Tower of Babel, he's going to limit your technology. He's going to make it a little harder for us. That's exactly what happens here. Although it's not our technology he goes after, he just curses the ground, so our work is going to be harder. But notice the pattern. The curse on Adam and the Tower of Babel are very similar. The curse on Eve and what happens in the flood are very similar. It's going after one of them, our ability to reproduce, and the other one, our ability to produce. And that's what these stories are. It's about God limiting us in these two areas. So now let's go a little further back to Genesis chapter 1. verse 27. And that says, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Now, people always ask, what does it mean to be made in the image of God? And the best answer I've ever heard of that is, why don't you look to see what the Bible tells you? Well, where will the Bible tell us? Well, if it tells us that we're made in the image of God, maybe the very next verses tell us what that means. So what do the next verses say? God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground. And I said a couple weeks ago, think about the second. So the first part of that is very clear in one of our two themes. The first thing says, be fruitful and increase in number. Eve's curse, doing that is going to be painful. The flood, God actually takes a shot at the progress we made in that area. We increased in number, we were getting better, we were living a long time, and God says, yeah, no, I'm limiting that. But the original image thing is be fruitful and increase in number, but then you have pain in childbearing and the flood. The second thing is rule over the fish in the sea, birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. And a couple weeks ago, I said, let's pretend that we actually have to do that. And I volunteered, so when it comes to subduing all the animals, I volunteered to subdue all the kittens. And I volunteered that table to subdue all the grizzly bears. Okay, and you guys can have sharks, but I get the kittens. Okay? And the point of that is that if you think about that command to rule and subdue the animal kingdom, if I were to be a betting person, again, it's humanity against a grizzly bear. My money is on the grizzly bear. But what has actually happened? We have zoos with grizzly bears and lions and sharks. We actually did what God told us to do. And how did we do that? With our technology. Being made in the image of God is a command to reproduce, and it's a command about technology. And what do those two things have in common? It's all about our creativity. God is introduced in Genesis chapter 1 as the creator. We are made in his image, and that means we are creators. That, I would argue, is the primary way that we are like God, or made in his image. We are creators. We are co-creators with God. Who created you? God and your parents. It is a fact. And every technological advancement that we are enjoying in this room, from the lights to the heat or air, I'm not sure which is on right now, to the chairs, to the tables, to the pens, to the paper, is all stuff we created. Again, I would argue with the help of God, but we are co-creators with God. It's what it means to be made in the image of God. Now, the problem is, and here's where the problem began, is once we became knowers of good and evil, our creativity is now dangerous. It's now dangerous. Just think about this. Think about if you went to the dark places in your mind and you wanted to do real damage to somebody else or to society, given your creativity, how much damage could you do? It's dangerous. And this is a quick side note. You'll notice in chapter 3, when God says, or when God calls the man, "Where are you?" Verse 3, chapter 3, verse 10. Adam answered, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked." If I was like, our dreams about showing up without our pants on or something, if I showed up here in my underwear, I wouldn't be afraid. I'd be ashamed. Okay? My primary emotion would be shame. But it doesn't say that. It says he's afraid. He's afraid. When we see the negative potential of our creativity, we should be afraid. We should be afraid of the damage we can do. And some of the things that cause great pain in my gut is when I think about the damage I've done to other people. It is scary. So we are meant to be creators, but when we became knowers of good and evil, when we decide what's right and wrong because it's something we like or don't like, that's dangerous. And so, again, can we think as a society, how many things has humanity created that is flat out dangerous? We could sit here and have a field day. Okay? And then think about some of the bad things we can do with the technology we created. Whether it's things of how we can torture people or, whatever. You have comment, Crick? Yeah. Yes. No. The fact that we are creators is a good thing. Correct. Yeah, the comment being made is just because we create something doesn't mean it's bad. It's how we use something. And again, the knife that I have is a good example. A knife can be a very positive thing. It can be a very negative thing. But I think the bottom line is that, I'm not saying being creators is bad. I'm saying our sinful nature, when we ate from the knowledge of good and evil, makes it dangerous. What's that? Sure. Yeah, language. We can use language to do a lot of damage. Absolutely. So, in the garden, God's punishments go after our creativity. In the flood, God goes after our reproductive progress. And in the tower, God goes after our technological progress. Again, doesn't end it, but he limits it. Because our creativity without boundaries is our danger. And now our creativity isn't just driven by the good we can do. It can also be driven by our desires, which are not always good. And uncontrolled creativity is a danger. Creativity without limits is dangerous. And I would argue, again, I'll reemphasize your point. The fact that technology can be used for good or evil is the problem. Not the good part, the evil part. And that's where the boundaries need to be. Now, real quick, I got like 2 minutes. I'm in great shape. The creation story in Genesis 1 ends with God taking a rest. God the Creator takes a Sabbath. And, as I've said before, it's not because God got tired. But did God get, man, that's a lot of creation. I got to put my feet up for a while. No. The reason why God takes a Sabbath is because God as Creator is a disciplined creator. He doesn't allow his creativity to get out of control. The purpose of the Sabbath is to enjoy what you've created. Because if you are always tinkering, that is not good for you or the creation. And the example I love to use here are our children. Parents, there comes a point where you need to stop parenting. Now, on one level, you never stop parenting. But what I mean by that is that when your kids are little, yeah, you've got to do a lot of, go there, not here, don't do this, stop that, take that out of your mouth, this kind of stuff. Okay? Look, when your kid is 22 and you're still doing that, you're the problem. So at some point, your relationship with your children has to change, where while you never completely stop being their parent, at some point you need to stop parenting and enjoy your children. That's what a Sabbath is for. Same thing with a painter. A painter who just keeps tinkering with their painting will never enjoy their painting. Or any art form, you pick the art form, any art form. Or anything else. It's why when I go golfing with my adult children, I tell myself, do not try to correct their game. Go golfing with your kids and do not try to fix their swing, correct their slice, help them chip or putt. For two reasons. One is because if I do that, they're going to get better than me and I can't handle that. I'm not that good of a golfer. But two is, I just want to go golfing with my kids. Can I just go golfing with my kids and stop parenting and just enjoy the kids that I've raised? You can't do that if you don't stop parenting. But if you're like me, you have to tell yourself, stop. It's almost like you have to take a forced rest or a Sabbath. Uncontrolled creativity is not good. And we have to limit ourselves. And I'll echo your point because it's a great point. That doesn't mean creativity is bad. It's good. There's lots of great technology that can be used for good or bad. But using it for good takes discipline. And you have to intentionally do that. It's not something that comes natural to us. It's part of the curse. Okay, any questions about that? That gives you a real good idea of the first 11 chapters of Genesis, about how we are created to be co-creators like God is, and because of the curse of the knowledge of good and evil, all sorts of stuff is messed up, and so God needs to take corrective action so things don't get out of control, and if you think about that, that's all an act of grace. He doesn't eliminate our creativity, doesn't eliminate our ability to reproduce. He doesn't destroy us and keep the earth. He destroys the earth and keeps us. It's all grace. And he's trying to tell us, I'm for you. Yeah, okay, I destroyed the planet. I get it. You don't trust me. I'm for you, not against you. And as I said earlier, all the other bad experiences that we experience that God doesn't stop, God's saying, look, I'm for you, not against you. Okay, next week, we'll start getting into Abraham and all that good stuff. And yeah, that's great. Let me close in prayer. And this is as close as I've finished on time in 5 weeks. Disciplined creativity. I have to know when to stop. Let me pray. Lord, again, we thank you for your goodness to us. And we thank you for your grace. And Lord, I thank you for all the different gifts and ways that you've made the people in this room creative. And Lord, I would ask that you would give us the wisdom in how to use the skills you've given us for good and for your glory and for the benefit of others. And Lord, help us to know when to put boundaries around our creativity. And Lord, again, we thank you. And it's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.